I woke up with a jolt, heart racing, lungs pulling in air like I'd just surfaced from deep underwater. But this wasn't my bed. The sheets beneath me were coarse, almost burlap-like, and they smelled faintly of mildew. My head pounded, as though I'd been drugged or maybe hit. I sat up slowly, blinking in the darkness. It wasn't pitch black, but the light in the room was off, dim and sickly, like the last glow of a candle about to die out. The walls were grey and cracked, smeared with what looked like old handprints or smudges, and the ceiling above me sagged slightly, as if it carried a weight it couldn't bear. I reached for my phone instinctively, left side of the bed, where it always was. But my hand met only cold, dusty floor. I scrambled to my feet, wobbling slightly, as a wave of nausea swept over me. The air smelled damp and metallic, like old pipes and forgotten time. There was a single wooden door ahead, painted white at some point, now chipped and stained. I walked over cautiously, each creaking floorboard underfoot screaming louder than I expected. My fingers trembled as I reached for the knob. It was ice cold, locked. I turned around, hoping to see a window, some kind of clue to where I was. But there was none. Just four walls, one door, and a battered wooden chair in the corner. Something about the chair made my stomach twist. It wasn't just old. It was positioned like it had been waiting. For someone. For me. My mind raced. The last thing I remembered was falling asleep in my apartment after binge-watching some true crime docuseries. I hadn't gone out. I hadn't invited anyone over. I lived alone. And yet, here I was, in a room that looked like it belonged in the basement of an asylum. I banged on the door. Hello? Anyone there? What the hell is this? My voice echoed too long, as if the room were larger than it looked. No answer. I kicked the door. Nothing, only the sound of my breathing and the dull, ringing silence that followed. Then I heard it. A faint dragging sound, like fabric being pulled across a rough surface. It was subtle, like it came from behind the walls themselves. I pressed my ear against the cold surface. Nothing. And then, a whisper. Not a voice I could understand, not in any language I knew. Just murmuring, incoherent, like someone talking in their sleep from another room, or from beneath the floor. I backed away quickly, heart thudding in my chest. I wasn't dreaming. I'd pinched myself hard enough to leave a bruise. The pain was real. The fear was real. I tried to calm down, to think logically. Maybe I'd been drugged. Maybe this was some sick prank or a kidnapping. But who? Why? I wasn't rich. I had no enemies, no exes crazy enough for this. I looked around for something, anything, that could help me get out. I grabbed the chair, flipped it over, checking the legs for loose screws, hidden notes, anything. Nothing. Then, behind the chair, something caught my eye. A small hatch, low to the ground, like a crawlspace door. It looked recently used. The dust around it disturbed. My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it. But what other choice did I have? Sit here and wait? For what? I got on my knees, heart hammering, and slowly pulled the hatch open. The hinges creaked, and I froze, listening. Nothing. Just darkness inside. A long, dark tunnel. I couldn't see the end. That's when the light bulb above me flickered and buzzed once, then went out. Total darkness. And then, a soft click. The door, the only door, unlocked. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Something wanted me to move. Something had planned this. I took a step back toward the center of the room, trapped between the open crawl space and the now unlocked door. And in that moment, a voice, not my own, whispered my name from somewhere behind me. Not shouted, not spoken, whispered. I spun around but saw no one. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just a place. This was a game. And I'd just been invited to play. I didn't want to turn around again. The whisper, it wasn't in my head. I know what a hallucination feels like. This was different. It had weight, presence, like it had moved the air itself. Still, I forced myself to look. Nothing. Just the same cracked walls, the same quiet darkness. But the crawlspace door, it was shut now. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even moved. My knees were still planted on the dusty floor. Slowly, I stood up and turned toward the main door. Still ajar, barely. Like it had opened just enough for me to know it was an option. I stepped toward it, reaching out again. This time the knob was warm. Almost too warm. A chill ran up my spine. The hallway outside was narrow, claustrophobic. Dim yellow lights buzzed overhead in spaced-out intervals, but none of them lit the corridor properly. Just patches of flickering visibility. The floor was tiled, old and cracked. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper. Flowers maybe, or vines. It was hard to tell under the grime. I started walking, but after just a few steps I stopped. Something was wrong. I turned around. The door I came from, gone, vanished, in its place. Only more hallway, seamless, as if it had never been there at all. My pulse spiked. I hadn't turned any corners, hadn't passed through any other doors. Just a hallway straight ahead, and now, somehow, behind me too. I picked a direction and kept walking. But the hallway didn't end. After what felt like 10 minutes, I noticed the same loose tile on the ground again. Same crack on the wall. I passed the same flickering light. Again and again. I stopped, looked behind me. Same scene, looked ahead, identical. I tested it, placed a small piece of wood from the floor against the wall as a marker. Walked forward, counted my steps. Reached the same spot, same marker. I was walking in a loop, but the hallway was perfectly straight. That's when the humming started. Faint, like someone humming a lullaby, just out of earshot. It was behind me. Always behind me. But no matter how quickly I turned, no one was there. And the humming kept going, steady, slow. The air grew thick. It was hard to breathe. Every breath felt like I was inhaling something heavier than air. Like fog soaked in iron. My chest tightened. I stumbled to the wall, leaning on it for support. That's when I noticed the wallpaper. The flowers. Oh, vines. They weren't a pattern. They were hand-drawn. Hundreds of tiny etchings, overlapping each other. And in between them, words, dozens of them, scratched into the wall with something sharp. Don't turn around. She watches. You were warned. The humming stopped. Silence. Then, footsteps, slow, measured, approaching from behind. I froze. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything. But my legs didn't respond. It was as if my body had gone offline, paralyzed by the sheer unnatural weight of that sound. The footsteps stopped inches behind me. I felt breath on my neck, cold and wet. A voice rasped in my ear. You're not supposed to be here. I turned around. Nothing. The hallway was empty again. I collapsed to the floor, shaking. My mind screamed for logic, but there was none. I wasn't in a building. I wasn't in a dream. This place, this thing, was changing around me, bending space like it was nothing. I stood up and ran. No direction, just forward. My legs burned, and the air grew colder. And then, just like that, a door. A new one. Standing at the end of the corridor where none had been before. I didn't hesitate. I slammed through it and fell into a room. Not the same one as before. This one was filled with mirrors, floor to ceiling, some shattered, some covered with sheets. But I could still see myself. 100 reflections staring back, my own terrified eyes in every direction. But then I noticed one of them wasn't me. He moved when I didn't. He smiled. I backed away, but every reflection stayed still, except that one. It raised its hand, and on the mirror's surface, words began to appear, written from the other side. "You've been here before." "No," I whispered aloud. "No, I haven't." The lights flickered, the reflections shimmered, and all of them, every single one, began to move. Not as mirrors, as doors. I stood frozen, surrounded by copies of myself, now opening slowly, each one revealing a different version of a room. A kitchen, a hospital, a burning house, a forest, a child's bedroom. Every one of them felt real, lived in. And each of me, the other versions, was standing there, watching, smiling. My legs gave out. I curled into myself, eyes shut tight. This place wasn't bending reality. It was reality, or 1,000 versions of it. And I'd walked right into its core. I don't know how long I stayed there, crouched in the middle of that mirrored room. Minutes, hours? Time didn't feel linear here. It bent and pulsed, stretched thin, like worn elastic, then snapped back with dizzying force. My reflection, the real one, if there even was such a thing anymore, stared back at me blankly, bloodshot eyes wide with fear. But then, something shifted. Not in the room, in me. A surge of pressure in my head, like my mind was pushing against a locked door, one that had been sealed shut for a long, long time. I felt it crack, just a little, and something came through. A memory. It hit me like a wave. I was 9, standing at the edge of a lake. My parents behind me, calling for me to stay close. But I didn't listen. I followed something. A voice. A whisper through the trees. I wandered too far. I got lost. And when they found me, 3 hours later, I couldn't remember a thing. Just cried and said, "She talked to me. The lady in the mirror." I had forgotten that memory, buried it. My parents chalked it up to stress, fear, imagination. But that wasn't all. There were more moments throughout my life. Strange gaps, strange places I'd wake up, convinced something had happened in the night. Once in my car, parked in the woods, I never remembered driving to. Once in my childhood bedroom, even though I'd moved out 5 years ago. Once in the attic of a house I swore I'd never been inside, and every time I dismissed it. Told myself I was tired, sleepwalking, maybe drinking too much. But now, it was undeniable. This wasn't my first time in this place. This place knew me. Another memory broke through, more vivid than anything. I was a teenager, 16, alone in my room, staring at my own reflection late at night. My reflection had blinked before I did. Just once. I ran. I tried to tell someone, but I couldn't find the words. I had repressed it all. This place had been pulling me in, little by little, my whole life, watching, testing. And now? Now it had me fully. The mirrored versions of myself started speaking. Not aloud, but in my head. Not all at once, but in overlapping echoes. "You forgot. You were chosen. You opened the door. She's waiting." "Who?" I whispered. "Who's waiting?" The mirror to my left, one of the only ones not shattered, shimmered and shifted, revealing a dark room with a single chair in the center. And in the chair, her. I don't know how to describe her face. It wasn't monstrous. That would have been easier. It was familiar, almost comforting, like a distant relative you half remember, but wrong. Her eyes were bottomless, like twin wells that knew every mistake I'd ever made. Her mouth didn't move, but I could hear her. "I've been waiting for you to remember." My body wouldn't move, but my mind raced. I tried to look away, but her gaze held mine like a hook in the spine. "You came to me when you were a child," she said. "You heard me. You followed the voice." "I didn't know," I muttered. "I didn't know what I was doing." "You did," she replied gently. "Curiosity opens doors that were meant to stay closed. And once opened, they can't be shut." I looked at my other selves in the mirrors. Each one nodded slowly. I wasn't the only version of me that had followed the voice. We all had. "What do you want from me?" I asked, more desperate now. She stood from the chair. The room behind her faded to black. "You already gave it," she said. "You gave me you." The truth shattered over me like a pane of glass. This wasn't a prison. This was a bargain, made unknowingly long ago. Every time I'd vanished. Every time I'd woken up in strange places. That was her pulling pieces of me back, feeding on the forgotten. And now, there was nothing left to take. I was hers. The mirrors cracked, all of them. My reflection screamed silently, clawing at the glass, trying to get out. I wanted to scream with them, but no sound came. The room collapsed into darkness, cold and endless. And then, I opened my eyes. I was back in my apartment, in my own bed. Morning sunlight poured through the window. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I sat up slowly. The sheets were familiar. The air smelled like coffee from the neighbors. Had it all been a dream? I stood and walked to the mirror, touched the surface. Just glass. But then, as I turned to leave, I caught something. My reflection didn't move. Not right away. It smiled, just a second too late. I didn't sleep the next night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it. That pull, that presence, like invisible fingers reaching through the darkness, gently brushing against the edges of my consciousness, waiting for me to drift off again. I kept the lights on, checked every mirror in my apartment. I even covered most of them with blankets and towels. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that one wrong glance, even at a reflection in a window, might send me spiraling back there. But something was changing. It was subtle at first. The layout of my apartment felt off. The hallway seemed longer. My bedroom window, which always faced the street, now looked out into a row of unfamiliar pine trees. I swore I lived in the city. On the third day, I found a door. Not a metaphor. A real door. It stood at the end of my hallway, where the bathroom used to be. Black, wooden, with an ornate handle that looked far too old to belong in any modern apartment. And I knew she was on the other side. I should have left, should have run into the street, screamed for help, moved cities, anything. But instead, I reached for the handle. Something in me needed to know. Needed to finish this. When I opened it, I expected the mirrored room. But it wasn't that. It was a forest. Silent. Grey. Not lifeless, but frozen. Every branch held in place as if time itself had paused. The air smelled faintly of ash and rain. And in the center of it all, a cabin. Small, rotten, half buried in moss, yet terribly familiar. I stepped in, and immediately, the door behind me vanished. Inside, everything was covered in dust. Furniture draped in old white sheets. Except for one thing. A mirror leaning against the far wall. No frame, no cracks, just a perfect smooth oval, I approached it slowly, heart thudding in my chest. My reflection stood still, unmoving, watching. But this time, it was different. It spoke, but not with a mouth. "Do you remember now?" it said. "Do you see the loop?" I felt sick. I didn't want to answer. "Every time you try to escape, you end up here. It resets. Your mind forgets, but your soul remembers." I broke the pattern. I whispered. "I remembered this time." "But you're still here," it said. "A different set, a different sequence, but always the same ending." "No," I said, "not this time." I slammed my hand against the mirror. It rippled like water. I stepped forward without thinking. My body moved on instinct. Through the surface, I fell, not down, through. It felt like tumbling sideways through 1,000 versions of myself. Some screaming, some laughing, some begging to be freed. I landed hard, back in my apartment only. It was darker, and the clocks didn't work. My phone was dead. The windows were just solid black panes. No light came through. I stepped outside my door and found myself in the hallway again. But this time it stretched endlessly. Room after room, all numbered 304, my unit number. I opened the first door. My apartment, but different. A version where I never moved out of my parents' house. The next door, same number. But this time, I was married. A wife I didn't recognize greeted me, holding a baby I didn't know. The next, I was dead. My funeral. Each door was a different life. A branch on some horrifying tree of choices I never made. And each one ended the same, with me standing in front of a mirror, with her waiting on the other side, with the whisper, "You always come back." I ran, for hours, days maybe, through door after door, timeline after timeline, hoping, begging, for one that didn't end in her eyes. Finally, I stopped, fell to my knees, and then silence. One last door appeared. This one wasn't numbered, just a single word carved into the wood. End? No handle, just a mirror in its center. I looked into it. My reflection looked tired, older, but it was me, truly me. No delay, no tricks, no whispers. And for the first time I asked it, "What if I don't go in?" My reflection smiled faintly. "Then it stays open. Forever?" I took a breath, turned around, and walked away. I don't know where I am now. The hallway's gone, the doors are gone, just this space. White, endless, silent, but she's not here. Not yet. Maybe I escaped. Maybe this is just another loop quieter than the last. Or maybe, just maybe, I finally broke free. But if you're reading this, if you've ever woken up somewhere you shouldn't have, seen something in the mirror that shouldn't be there, don't listen to the voice. Don't follow the reflection. Because once you do, she never lets go.